Let's talk about Twitter. Ben Perry, Bruce Reyes-Chow, two public theologians, pastor type people who've been on this platform for quite a while. First, just for the sake of getting it in the video, tell us who you are, what you do, and what your Twitter handle is. Ben, let's start with you.
Sure. I'm Reverend Benjamin Perry. I work for Middle Church in New York City. I'm the Minister of Church Growth and Media Strategy. And I use he and they pronouns, and my Twitter handle is @faithfullybp.
I'm Bruce Reyes-Chow, and coming to you from San Jose, California. Use he, him pronouns. The what do I do question is a very complicated one. I do many things mediocrely. I'm mediocre at a great many things. Most recently, I'm writing a new book with Broadleaf, which will come out spring of 2024. I'm very excited. A total survey of the Christian faith in 300,000 words or 30,000 words. I don't remember words it is. Yeah. And my handle is B Reyes-Chow on everything.
Bruce, I didn't know that we were publishing siblings, because I actually have my book. My first book is coming out with Broadleaf in May. It's called Cry Baby, Why Our Tears Matter. It's a book all about crying.
Oh my gosh. I just signed my contract yesterday. Like, I just sent it out to Patreon to said, just like, we've been knowing it's coming because they kept warning me, like, it is coming, but it takes forever, which is great. Yep. But yeah, just signed it, and we can make it public. You're the first public thing to find. I know, it's earth-shattering. TMZ is probably queuing up the video.
They're beating down your door.
That's right.
I would say we should tweet it, but we might get our account suspended if we tweet too much these days. You never know.
Only if you tweet it as me and you don't say it's a parody, apparently.
Well, in theory, let's get into that, because that's the latest news as of, we're talking on Monday morning, November 7th, as of the last 24-ish hours. It seems like Twitter's new chief, twit-in-chief, what does he call himself these days? I don't know.
I'll call him a twit.
I think he did say chief twit.
Yeah, I think he did, which I don't know if he really... Anyway, the latest thing has been, if you are impersonating another account, but you don't label that you're a parody account, you are at risk of being suspended. No warning at all. This happened to Kathy Griffith. A bunch of other celebrities changed their names to Elon Musk, really out of protest. She got suspended. I saw others who even put parody in their account, and they still got suspended. And it turns out that this has actually been in Twitter's terms of service since the beginning, that you're not allowed to impersonate other accounts. So it's not like this is a new thing, but it seems like it's unique in how it's being focused on people impersonating a certain account. So what do you think about this Twitter platform in this current moment? You've both been on it for quite some time. You're not new to this little blue bird, but it seems like it's been through lots of shifts in the past, ever since Donald Trump became president. For sure, its tone has shifted, but now as a new CEO steps into the office, we're feeling the pull of it in all sorts of ways. So what's your take on just where things are at in the current moment of Twitter? Bruce, let's start with you, since I think you've probably been on Twitter the longest of the three of us.
I'm finding myself in a lot of rooms where I'm the oldest person in the room these days, so
I didn't say you're the oldest person in the room. Yeah, I think you've been on Twitter the longest. You're just the earliest adopter.
I am the earliest adopter.
You joined in the early 90s.
So I
before there was Twitter.
I didn't get my three-letter handle. That's what I really wanted, because I mean, if it could have been BRC, that would have been gold. I'd never leave, no matter what. Anyway, I probably have always had initial reactions to things like this to just leave, but then I never act on it. I've seen Twitter in many forms. It's lost some of that old school Twitter interactive friends just hanging out vibe, which is okay. I mean, I still force that into being because I think it's an important part of what we do. I still tweet all of my stuff and, so try to interact with people. I do use a third party to kind of schedule things out, but it's always kind of wanting to keep that interactive piece. So my take right now is, if there's a way for Twitter to force me to not be able to kind of be fully me, and stuff starts leaking into my newsfeed that I have intentionally kept out, those are the two things that I'm kind of waiting for. But to this point, that hasn't happened. I don't think I've found anything that does what Twitter does. And so I'm not quite ready. I'm exploring some other ones, like many people are, but I'm not quite ready to drop the "I'm out, meet me over at" tweet.
What about you, Ben? Where do you stand on how it's currently sitting in our world and our Twitter timelines?
Yeah, I mean, similarly to Bruce, I think that some of the things that Twitter's offers that I really, really deeply value are not present in other places. I think the way that it facilitates conversations across different disciplines and like brings, people who are experts in a whole bunch of different, fields into a sort of a common space is really, really valuable. It's certainly something that's enriched my own personal growth, something that's, opened me up to viewpoints that I, previously just didn't see because I didn't interact with people in the way that like Twitter brings me into contact with folks. I think also, the way that Twitter has dramatically democratized speech on the internet, and particularly reaction to the news and who's shaping the news cycle is something that's really, really important. And similarly, I'll speak personally as like, the way that it's connected to me in like the queer communities on Twitter has been really, really both super life-giving for me as a human being, and also I think really powerful, as someone who creates content and someone who creates, pieces of art or public theology that I want to, communicate to a particular community or communities. That's really, really useful to me personally. And I know that, that's something that's shared very frequently. Like my boss, Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, will talk about, the power of Black Twitter to, build cultural and political power, which I think is, readily apparent to anybody who's used the platform. And I think that, to leave the space simply because somebody has bought it, I think with many of the intentions because they recognize that power and are afraid of it, feels to me like not the most strategic and certainly not sort of the brave thing to do in this moment.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I am resonating with both of you on just thinking back to what Twitter has been and the ways it's facilitated those actual human connections, as well as the way it's given voice to so many people to respond and react to what's happening in the world and how that's become an actual thing. I mean, this goes way back to, what was it? The Arab Spring rising in Egypt, over a decade ago was a space where Twitter was used for that activation. And just the way it's always been, a way to capture what's happening before traditional media outlets. I remember when Sully's plane landed in the Hudson years ago, the first images online were shared on Twitter before anywhere else saw the story. And so it's always been that crowdsourced public platform. Yep. And then obviously, as we know, it's taken, every platform evolves as it grows with new users. It becomes just a different thing. And that's okay, like Bruce is saying. Having a certain president in the White House, seeing it as his favorite platform, changed it again for a lot of reasons. And it made a different psychology around opening the app for a lot of people. So yeah, what is it in this moment, and does just leaving it, what does that actually accomplish by just leaving something just because it's become difficult or hard or maybe toxic or not what it used to be? Yeah, I'm with you there. It's definitely changed, but that doesn't mean what does it say if we just be like, oh, because I don't like the way it is anymore, I'm not going to play here? I mean, that seems like the posture, that I think so many progressive, justice-focused people of faith critique. Just because this isn't what it used to be, you still have to be engaged and participate, and the struggle is still present and necessary more than ever, perhaps, like you're saying, Ben. Yeah, that's an interesting.
I think, we're obviously all right. But I also think that, I every once in a while I'm reminded that not everybody in the world is on Twitter. I'll go to I go to a gathering and I'm like, well, aren't you following me on social media? Don't you know what I'm doing? I don't say that out loud, but I kind of am like, oh, that's right. Not everybody in the world is like tracking all this stuff. I love it. It's a great reminder because I think for some, this may just be the thing that's just like, I just can't do this anymore. And so I've seen some of my colleagues that just like, I think it's not a bad thing for some folks to be like, if this is causing you this much stress and that you haven't been able to find some level of it's just a platform in your life, then yeah, I think maybe this could be a time, because it's just going to get more tumultuous over the next few days, apparently, and weeks and months. And so I kind of am just like, okay, so this, and I think, Jim, you and I have talked about this before. It's just a delivery mechanism, right? And so how much power we give that over our emotional well-being is something to really listen to. So I kind of am with folks leaving. I'm like, yeah, okay, if you need to go, that's fine. We'll connect somewhere else. But I have seen some people like going out and trying to like burn it all down, and I'm like, well, I don't think you actually have the power to do that. So you should just leave.
Something you just said that like really powerfully resonates, and like an important sort of caveat to what I said earlier, which is that like I don't think we should stay in any space that is not, you know, that is actively harming us emotionally or that is not serving us. Like if you're in a place and you're like, wow, when I open Twitter, I experience psychological duress, or like, oh, I find that like I'm unable to like do my life well and be in meaningful relationships with people, you know, here in the mortal plane. Like, yeah, get out. Like that, it's not worth it. It like no social media platform is worth, you know, you being less of a full human being because you're on it. It's interesting now. I live in Maine, and a lot of my friends, young people, like are not on social media at all, or maybe have one that they like kind of use sometimes, but like pretty radically unplugged community up here, and people are they're doing good. Like you can live
they're doing okay.
Like you can live a wonderfully integrated full life without being on social media. I promise it's possible. And like if that means like that's where you need to be, or like even for a season that's where you need to be, then like please be you and be whole. That being said, you know, one of the things that I like about Twitter as a minister and as like to do public theology is I think that, you know, as somebody who believes in the power of the word, Twitter has really, you know, streamlined that delivery mechanism into just that. Like I don't have to edit a video. I don't have to, you know, make a beautiful image. And, you know, I wake up and I'm like, ooh, this thing is burning on my heart. Let me find like a cogent way to say it and put it into the world. And that's done. And I can do that oftentimes in 3 minutes. And then I move on to my next thing. And it actually helps me, for me, build that balance between my real life and social media, because its demands on my time are so much lower than other forms of social media creation.
Yeah, I would say I'm raising two Gen Zers, and their level of interaction online, it's really interesting. I mean, they're very, I wouldn't say they're completely unplugged, but they're pretty unplugged. I mean, there's a few things they do because they have to for work, and you know, but it is interesting that. It'd be interesting to see who is doing the most hand-wringing over this, and like who are the folks that are really struggling about this versus those who have like it's just air at this point, and we go in and out, and you know it's not as it doesn't create as much drama for some folks.
Yeah, it's like this matters, but at the same time, this doesn't really matter. If Twitter were to just vanish tomorrow, okay, that would leave a void maybe in Ben's 3 minutes every morning, and he would need a new outlet. He would just start texting all of us his thoughts, which is cool too, I guess. But that's the reality of there was very much a robust life before Twitter, and like Ben, you're saying, there's life currently of people who just aren't on these spaces. Think back to 2005. That was before Twitter even existed. That was before Facebook was even really widely available beyond a few small universities.
You were still alive, everything, and yeah, fine.
I was there.
Yeah, we were still living. Not to mention who was our president back then anyway. That was a whole different point of life we all experienced.
Well, and I think, you know, to your question of who's doing the hand wringing, like my, you know, determination. I just want to be really honest on this in these little walls. Like my determination to remain on Twitter is not at all removed from the fact that I have spent, you know, 6 years or however many years of my life building, you know, a small but devoted following who like reads my things and like I have a book coming out in May, and I'm like, I keep joking with Aaron. I'm like, Twitter can fall apart, but it's got to do it in June. Like if we can just make it through May and I can get my book out into the world, like that's a really important thing for my life personally. And I think that there are a lot of people for whom like Twitter has become a really important vehicle for like making sure that the world knows about the things that we've put a lot of time and energy into caring about. And because so many other of like the traditional mechanisms for promotion have sort of fallen apart, and like, you know, more and more publishing houses rely on authors to do their own self-promotion and stuff, like this is my vehicle. Like I'm not going to get on TikTok and make a big platform. Like I just don't have the time like that. Those 6 years that I spent
I want to see those dances. I want to see the dances.
This is it, baby.
If I ever hire a person, I want to find somebody who can get me on TikTok and make it look so clearly ironic that it's charming. Because if I do it myself, it'll just be mortifying.
Ben, your TikTok should just be you set up a camera every morning and you film yourself writing that tweet, and that's it.
That's actually
I
pretty
mean,
good.
my book's about crying, and I've actually thought about making a TikTok where I just take videos of me crying and then like superimpose text, and I cry a lot. I'm like, this would actually be pretty easy. I just like throw the camera on. And
So this, I think, is the tension that so many of us who've been on this platform for years, like we're saying, are experiencing, because we've found the ways in which it's built community, whether it's communities around the things we've developed in our own personal, professional lives, communities we've connected to. You know, Ben, you mentioned the queer community, progressive faith community, Black community. There's all these spaces where voices that weren't always given the microphone to be heard suddenly have that connection among themselves, and others can finally hear what they're saying in a long overdue space. So there's been that good, and you know, since Trump's flagrant use of the platform, we've seen it used for all sorts of other purposes, amplified really there. And now with Musk's recent, you know, seemingly knee-jerk accidental purchase of it, we're seeing all sorts of other things happen. That's the tension of like, there has been good. That good doesn't vanish just because there's a new CEO, but there's also so much that's just obviously flagrantly not good. You know, saying free speech is anyone can say anything they want. Well, what impact and effect does that have? And then obviously the egocentric nature of how he's using it. How do you just hold those two things in tension, the good and the shit of a digital space? I mean, that's not unique to this current moment of Musk buying Twitter. Look at Facebook over the past any number of years and we could have the same conversation. How many of us buy things on Amazon Prime? That's the same conversation. But here we're finding it in Twitter, of a platform that's been meaningful, been enriching, actually helped give life, and now moments where it just seems so antithetical to that, or just like, I don't know. How do you hold those two things in tension? That to me, I think, is maybe the way of navigating the how and why we stay, or how it can be this thing that's has glimpses of evil can still be used for good. How do you sit with that? Solve the world's problems in a sentence or two. Bruce, how do you handle that? You've been here for a while.
Yeah.
You've seen the shit that's coming.
So I have no need to be a bridge builder or have all sides represent. I just don't. I know that the dumpster fire is out there, and so I've culled my lists for the last years on all my platforms. I don't need to see everything terrible out there. I'm there to amplify voices, to share what I'm doing, to support people. I have no need to be a bridge building space. That has always been a critique from many. It was like, well, you should hear all voices. I'm like, I don't actually need to. Like, I don't.
have you heard all voices?
If you want to do that, like, that's fine, but that's not how I use this platform. And so that is really one of the, as I'm thinking about the future, like if there's a way that people can just sneak stuff into my feed that really starts to impact, like, do I want to click on this to get on the platform? That's when I would start to have a little bit of like, okay, so they've ruined the structural nature of the interaction, which I can't control. That's different. And so, but for now, I just don't feel a need to bring that into my view. That's not my reason that I'm on Twitter. But Ben, I was laughing because I once just put out a thing about I'm going to leave Facebook, I'm going to leave all these things, and I had a publisher that within 5 minutes was like, could you maybe just take a break? Author problems, but it was but you're right. I mean, I've seen this thread. There's a thread happening, I think it started yesterday, where some folks are seeing followers disappearing.
Yep.
And whether that's bot clearing, which could be fine, or whether there's something else going on, that is kind of, there is this part of the community that relies greatly on our living and our impact in this. And so when you mentioned that, I was like, yeah, that is something that I think a lot of folks don't realize, or don't for many of us.
How about you, Ben? How do you handle that tension?
Yeah, I want to just call back to something that Bruce said almost in the very beginning of our conversation, where he was like, yeah, there used to be a time when Twitter was more like, yeah, you just like hang out and like find little informal connections with friends and stuff. And like, that's not the nature of the platform sort of broadly now, but I find ways to sort of make that for me. And I think that for me has always been my approach to social media, is like, there's always this tension between like, oh, what are the ways that like algorithmically the app would like you to behave? And then how do you actually want to be as a person in the world? And when those two things are in conflict with one another, for me personally, I just try to focus on like, how do I want to behave in the world? And so, for something like Twitter is a space which oftentimes sort of rewards a kind of manufactured cynicism about the world. And like, that's just not who I am. I'm a pretty earnest person. Earnestness, like, doesn't have a whole lot of like cultural cachet these
It does
days.
not sell. I wish it did, because we'd
But
probably
I've
be
sort
much
of-
more popular.
Yeah, but I've sort of made a brand about just being myself and being earnest and caring deeply about things and wearing that on my sleeve. I'm like writing a book about crying and why it matters. I mean, so like literally like it doesn't matter to me if that work is going upstream, as long as I have the like mechanism and the ability to do it and do it in a way that feels still nourishing to me and I think effective in connecting with other people. Like that's fine. Like even if there was a significant uptick in like the amount of hate speech and stuff on Twitter, like I think that's a huge problem. I think it's certainly going to make, the ability to be on the app and not, suffer psychologically worse. But I think that there will be ways to find and connect and create communities with people who, are loving and caring and, you can sort of create those connections with. And so as long as that's possible, I'm going to keep doing that. I think that there's also the other piece that we were sort of not talking about, which is just that it's entirely possible that in 3 months, like Elon Musk has fired all the people at Twitter who he actually knew how to make the platform go, because he certainly doesn't know anything about that. And all of a sudden, like, there's going to be a problem and no one's going to be able to fix it, and Twitter's just going to crash, and like, where I'm just going to like log on in the morning and be like, I got a thought, and then be like, oh, guess not. Oh, guess no thought for me.
Actually, I've had those moments where I'm like, this could just go away.
Yeah.
Like it feels like it, and it felt like it could go away like any time. Like he just decides, screw it, we're done. Like it could just, and I think actually that's the only way that a significant shift to anywhere else is going to happen. Otherwise, we're going. I've been playing with a few other ones, and a few folks are there, but I'm not drawn there because of a community draw or anything.
I opened up Mastodon, had like a panic attack, and like immediately closed.
You have to take a breath, because there's enough different that it's like, okay, what is this? Like, so I'm on it, and I've followed a few folks have followed, but I'm not yet like why I don't see the draw. And and Sky Blue is supposed, or Blue Sky or whatever, it's supposed to come out at some point. And do I trust Jack Dorsey again? I mean, it's all that kind of stuff to see. Like, but until Twitter just goes away, or it significantly is hindering, I think most of us are going to stick around. Until
I'm just
really
tired. I'm like closer to being off of social media than I am to joining a new social media platform, which is like probably not a great thing professionally as somebody who does like a lot of digital
Be
ministry.
Real.
Like,
Get on Be Real. That is my new favorite place, is Be Real. I see my little nephews and nieces all the way up to grown adults that I still love the newness of these platforms, and will jump on, but not necessarily leave it something else, but just to kind of see what this is going to be like and spend a little time. And my imagination's been caught by Be Real. So there you go.
See, you're more curious than I am, though, Bruce.
Hey Ben, your cynicism could turn into some good algorithmic boosts on Twitter, though, so watch out.
That's right.
Ben, you mentioned earlier, and we've all echoed it in many ways, if any online platform is harmful to your own mental health, psychology, just the way we show up in all of reality, you should not force yourself to stay on a space. In some ways, taking a break, permanently deleting, decline, whatever, can be the necessary step towards our health. But I think I also am hearing us all say and echoing that if every progressive person of faith were to just abandon this platform out of protest over its CEO, what does that actually accomplish for this good news of justice and equity and empathy in the world? Nothing. I would say perhaps those of us who aren't, facing the personal oppression in certain ways, if you can show up in this place, I mean, that's needed now almost more than ever. If people of faith only showed up in the places where justice was already enacted, I mean, what's the point? We have to show up in the places where there is literally injustice happening, big or small, whatever scale. So however we see that happening in a platform like Twitter, I think it's almost like it's even more essential in this current moment and whatever between now and when Twitter just accidentally gets shut off by some intern.
Well, like, and you're worried because the space has been taken over by like a billionaire whose, economic interests are diametrically opposed to democracy. Like, good luck finding a space that's not infiltrated with forces like that.
That's called the 4 years of Trump's presidency. Democracy being taken over by a billionaire with his own self-serving interests in mind. We've learned, if anything, the Trump presidency was the training ground for how to handle Twitter, because we all know how to show up in a space when a billionaire steps in thinking the world revolves around him. And we're like, well, let's actually still give voice to those who are muted.
Well, and like looping back to, where we were a little bit before about like the impact that Twitter has had on culture, I think about things like, the aftermath of police shootings, and like how often is there like a big media story that is parroting like a police narrative that's actually not at all true, but is one that would have actually served as the dominant narrative until somebody posts something to Twitter, somebody posts a video, somebody is a relative of the person and was like, I was there, and then all of a sudden the whole narrative changes because you've democratized this space that allows people to interact with the news in a way that just wasn't possible in significant ways before, because you also have a whole bunch of other journalists sitting as an active audience. And so you have this ability, like Twitter is really a space that has considerable cultural impact, and one that is not, that in many cases bends that arc towards justice. And so, say, okay, yeah, I'm gonna get off here because it's like personally distressing to me, particularly as like someone who moves through the world with considerable social privilege, feels a little. And it's been interesting to me watching who's like, I am leaving Twitter, like I just simply cannot with this Elon man, and then who's like, no, I'm staying here and I'm gonna fight. And not to say that there's that I haven't seen all kinds of people in both camps, but I have noticed sort of a list towards the folks with more social privilege being the ones who are walking away, and the folks who really need that space as a democratizing influence being the folks who are more willing to stick it out and fight. And that's sort of where I find myself drawn.
It's like when Dietrich Bonhoeffer chose to return back to Germany. I can't just abandon my people. I have to go there and be a part of the resistance.
Maybe a little aggrandizing, but yes.
I'm not quite sure.
I just signed on this morning. I'm not sure it puts me in a Dietrich Bonhoeffer camp, but
okay. It's somewhere between those 2 points.
I've never been in Twitter jail, so I don't know anything about that kind of kind of life.
Yeah,
same thing.
Bruce's letters from Twitter prison.
Somebody's written that. Somebody somewhere has done that. Anyway.
So imagine for a minute, if the CEO, Mr. Musk, could join us on this call. I didn't share this link with him. Technically it was shared in our DM, so he could probably just hack in and get it.
Yes.
Jump right in.
What if he were here with us? What would you say to him about what's happening? The two of you. I'll jump in as well
for conversation.
We wear interesting
Our
hats.
books would be really high sellers. Then we would leverage that to the hilt.
Exactly.
That is one thing. Anyway,
remember when I made Elon cry?
And it's on camera. Yeah, good for your book.
Sales.
What would you say to him? Maybe even just like what tone would you? What kind of approach would you want? Is this going to be the let me tell you, or hey, I'm going to be pastor whoever to you? Like how would you even engage him if you had that opportunity? And what might actually you say to this CEO of this space that we're finding ourselves still on?
Well, considering I actually do feel like one of the ways that I have been most effective on all these platforms is not diving into kind of that space of ad hominem attacks and I just don't. That does not feed me at all. And I know some people are really good at it. Other people think they're good at it, but I've never wanted to dive into, because I think it just leads to ableism, all kinds of things. It just doesn't do the message any good. At the same time, it doesn't draw a lot of attention, right? I think that's the. So I would probably acknowledge some of his humanity and what might be going through, and then ask him questions about what's your intent about this, right? When you tweeted out the thing about Nancy Pelosi's Paul Pelosi and this thing that's clearly not true, what was your thinking about that? And want to really press on choices that he would make about what he shares, and then why delete it? Like I don't think I've ever deleted a tweet that wasn't because there was a huge typo. There was something, like, even if I'm wrong, I've always left it. I just feel like that's important. So I kind of feel like I'd want to walk through. That's a great illustration of his power and wanting to see if he understands his power, and get into his head about why tweet that, why delete it, why. I would just be fascinated to hear his actual response by somebody he didn't feel like was attacking him.
Yeah, it's often the people with the most power and privilege who need to be reminded of the distinction between intent and impact.
Yeah.
He might have great intent for a lot of what he's doing, but is he aware of the impact it has on actual lives and communities and the ripples that continues to play out. That's a good, like, direct and still pastoral approach, Bruce. That's very good. Very, very Bruce.
Very Bruce. Yeah. On
Yeah,
brand.
I don't really want to be Elon's pastor, so like Bruce can have that job. But I mean, I would honestly probably just tell him like the effect that Twitter had on like my life personally. You know, when I started using Twitter, I was still closeted. I was still, you know, really going through a lot of like my own internal soul searching about who I was and what I believed about the world. I found communities that affirmed me. I was out to people on Twitter before I was ever out publicly. You know, I was out to some people in my own personal life quietly, and I was out to some people on Twitter who really helped me think through things in sort of a more of a public way. And I was met with such care and attention and love on a digital platform in a way that I have never experienced anywhere else. And it opened doors for me professionally. It allowed me to be connected to people who I now consider friends. It allowed me to minister to people. I can't tell you, Elon, I'm talking to you directly, but I can't tell you the number of times that like queer kids end up in my DMs because I leave them open, talking about not feeling like they can come out to their parents, but talking to me. Or, you know, trans kids who are in unaffirming homes that want to talk to me because they know that it's a safe space. Those kinds of connections I value and treasure so deeply, and I really hope you're not going to do anything that will destroy a space that has enabled them.
And that's that last part, right? Is here's what your impact would do if things change so much that is no longer possible. And I think that for me is really if the platform leaves no more space for us to work around it, then there's serious questions to be asked about why we're giving them their amplification and usage. So.
Because this has always been and still continues to be more than just a really good marketing space. This is more than just a popular internet bulletin board. I mean, that goes back to Twitter's inception in 2006 when it very much was a community space. I mean, when the users of Twitter invented the hashtag, you know, it wasn't imposed by the corporation, but people just started using this little mark to, you know, categorize themes among content. And that element of it being a crowdsourced community first space that's shifted, that's changed, but it hasn't vanished. And it makes me wonder, does Elon Musk realize he bought that as well? He didn't just buy a really popular social network. He didn't just buy the thing that seems to be, you know, the cultural currency of so many moments. You know, everyone wants a blue check mark. You can get yours for $8 now. But he bought a thing that was truly life-giving and life-saving community. And that is essential. And like you all said, if that goes away, then okay, where can we find that, and where do we? And that really should be, I think, the work of faith leaders all these online spaces. Where do we see an online space giving the potential for that authentic connection, the discovery of new voices that have always been speaking, but you just haven't had the opportunity to hear them? How can we cultivate those spaces intentionally, both to show up as faith leaders, but then to invite others to be there as well? That's always been the work of ministry, and now in these online spaces even more so. And we've been lucky for 15, 16 years, 17, 18, however many years to see Twitter as a space for that. But I guess, will it maintain that, Elon? It's gotta, because that's been the most life-giving aspect for so many people in the world. I don't care what the Kardashians are tweeting, but I do care that, you know, a queer kid finds themselves mirrored and heard and seen and affirmed in a way that they never had in their conservative Midwest community, because suddenly they discovered that there are other people who exist like them as well, and that's beautiful. So I don't think Truth Social is going to give us that.
Oh no.
I had a little like, I'm going to join it just to see how quickly I get kicked off, or just to that kind of idea. I kind of want to see what's out there, but there is enough on. I have had some people that have responded to folks and drawn me into some people, and I'm like, oh my, yes, people are terrible. Like I've been able to somehow build this wall. I saw one by somebody that said it will come down to Herschel Walker will be the greatest senator in the history of the United States. I'm like, how do you write that at all? I mean, so many other things you can say to support, but how? Like, what?
Well, you know, if our criteria is the 40-meter dash,
I guess I'm just like, I don't even, I can't, and there's probably who are faster. Like, I'm just like, it's right, may not even still be that. I heard John Glenn could run like, nope, no.
Diane Feinstein. Don't count her out.
You never know.
You never know. You never know. All right, I have one final question for all three of us, and you can wrap up any final thoughts or rants or ramblings in it as well. Okay, so Elon's left our table. Bye, Elon. Great to talk with you. But now, say just, a faith leader who's new to this online space sits down with you across the coffee table, next to you at the bar, wherever you're finding yourself, because so many faith leaders have been thrust into these online spaces new. We've been on these spaces for decades, just in our personal lives, our professional lives, but a lot of our colleagues are just literally still trying to figure out how to tread water, let alone how to do the back float. What would you say to them about Twitter in particular for the short term and long term in their role as a faith leader? How should they be present? I'll go first. You guys can think for a minute. I'd probably open up, to John 1 if we had a Bible nearby and say, this is, a poem where we see, once again, incarnation at the center, where God is dwelling among the people. Yes, and the word incarnation means carne, flesh, but I like to think of it less about the actual meat on my skin and more about the act of being present. And in the concept of 2,000 years ago, that was just the way they knew how to be present, was to be sitting in the same space. But we now know to be present can happen in so many ways, and we need this work of love and justice to be present, especially in the spaces where there might be hostility and dissonance and difference. So how can a faith leader follow that call to incarnational ministry? I think one way is to find those spaces where that presence of love and justice is needed. And I think, we've talked a lot of ways in which Twitter does that. So I think that is a reason why a faith leader could or should be in any of these online spaces, Twitter included. And I could go into a lot of things, but I want to hear from the two of you. Ben, what about you? You're sitting at the bar, at the coffee shop with a faith leader who's new to this online stuff, and they're like, Twitter? What do you say to them?
I would say that one of our deepest calls as ministers is to find places where we can show up as fully ourselves. And so that hopefully means that you get called to a church that allows you to be all of who you are. And that by extension, when we think about being in online spaces, we should be looking for spaces that really we can show up as the best versions of who we are aspiring to be. And so I feel like I have personally been able to find that in Twitter. As much as I feel like I can be myself in an online space, this is the space where I've been able to live into that. And I don't know what that is for you. Maybe it's TikTok, maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's Twitter. Maybe it's you're just not going to be online and you're going to root really deeply in your community and do wonderful, incredible work. And I really, even as somebody who has made a career out of doing forms of digital ministry and who thinks that there's incredible value in that work, I don't want to ever be prescriptive about the way that you need to do your ministry or your life, because you are the only person who can figure that out. That's between you. It's between God and your community. And you're going to find and you're going to hear a call to show up in the world. And I really hope that you can stand there and say, yes, here I am.
I hope Elon is at the bar where you're having this conversation and he can overhear that too, because that was powerful for a lot of people.
Are you hanging out in the same bars where Elon's hanging out?
Yeah. $80 cocktails.
Up there in Maine.
That's my life.
Definitely.
Exactly. Just me, Elon, and a moose.
I've never been to. Oh no, I actually have been to Maine. I went to Maine in the winter, which is
that's a choice.
Not the time to go. Anyway, so I'm. Let's see. The more we have these conversations about bringing people online, the more they say the same kind of thing, right? Reminding people that it is simply a delivery mechanism. Now, so if we don't assign too much power over our lives and our world, then we can get into it and use it for good. I mean, I would kind of think use it like as you would look at anything else. And so one thing I would just remind folks is it's simply a delivery mechanism, and you have to learn how to navigate it really well before you can actually be effective there, and not expect that you're just going to be able to get on. I mean, I think it dismisses the work that many of us have done in that space to just think that somebody you can get on and just be immediately like, why are my things not going viral? Well, we could give you a lot of reasons. I wish, I mean, we're trying to figure it out. So I think there's helping people to kind of just get the complexity of it a little bit. And then I also, going to Ben, a little bit you were saying, I think I've seen a lot of colleagues who I think are actually online too much, knowing the context in which they're serving and the roles they have. And there's a little bit of, I would say, escapism because maybe this other context. So just figuring out how it rolls in your rhythm of life and ministry in a way that's healthy and effective. So stepping out a little bit further than the place you're serving versus being so active over here that this community that you've been called to love and pastor is feeling like, hey, wait a minute. We never agreed that you were going to pastor two churches, us here and then the one on Twitter. So, I mean, I think there's just, as we do with everything, figuring out how to navigate the complexities of it and not giving it too much power over our lives. And that's then I can feel like, okay, my role on Twitter are these things, and these are the things I'm committed to be there, and how I want to move through how I want to be on Twitter. And I think, Ben, you and I are very similar in that I just bring everything, not totally everything, but everything that I'm willing to put on Twitter. And that's a pushback, I think, on this one-dimensionalizing that Twitter wants us to do. And so I think I would encourage people to be fully themselves as much as they feel comfortable. That's a statement of resistance against kind of, I think, conflict porn. Like, it's just, you just want to have this. And I'm like, no, you're going to hear about my thoughts on the NWSL, and you're going to hear my thoughts on this, and you're going to get my kids, and then here, I just did Orange Theory yesterday because I'm part of a cult. I mean, all these things that we do, because now you can't just say I'm just some, whatever. And if you do, that's on you. Like, I didn't give you a person that's what it's one-dimensionalized. So I think I would encourage people to just be as fully them as they are comfortable to be. And eventually the goodness of what Twitter has done will begin to show through.
Verily I say unto you, what Twitter has done for me.
Please tweet that out. Feel free to quote me.
Oh, Ben, Bruce, like we said earlier, we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but Bruce, you are on the West Coast, Ben and I are on the East Coast, so we've made you be up a little extra early, even though you confessed earlier that you just got back from the East Coast, so you're in a bit of time travel, bodily flux yourself. But I just want to say thank you to you both for hanging out on a Monday morning to record this conversation, and be sure, everyone watching this, that you are following these two gentlemen on Twitter and all the work that they are up to and the communities they're a part of, and the things we've shared here. And if you have other ideas or questions or ways to use Twitter or these social platforms or navigating, the good and evil that exists simultaneously in reality, easy stuff, right? Let's just solve that in a tweet.
Yeah.
Drop a comment, post it
Evil
on Twitter,
bad.
tag these guys. Yeah. Evil bad, good. There we go. I've done it.
This is the gospel. That's it.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you. More to come. This won't be the last time we talk about all this stuff, but I'm glad we could have this moment to chat. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.